Let me just clean this off for a second. There we go. All right, everybody. How's everybody doing today? Hopefully the audio is working. I know we're a little bit late, so apologies for that. We are headed into week number 2, and I'm a little bit under the weather, but we're gonna power through it. So, all right. So for those of you who are first time, thank you for joining. For those of you who are back, welcome back. The way this works, primarily DFS questions, but any questions are live, are available, are fair game. So go ahead and ask away, and I'll do my best to answer anything. So if you guys can give this video a like, we have been trying to ask for that as we continue to try and grow our YouTube channel. And let's go ahead and let me tweet out the link. And Okay. All right, let's get started. First question, Arthur. Best flex in PPR, Dobbins, Damian Harris, Ayuk, or Julio? Let me just pull this up. Woefully unprepared. Dobbins, Harris, the other two, Ayuk or Julio? Yeah, it's Julio for me. I just wanted to double check. So I actually do really like Julio this week. I think that you look at the history of Mike Evans and Marshawn Lattimore, and it's not great for Evans. And with Chris Godwin out, Leonard Fournette has also struggled against that defense that has been consistently one of the best in football. So how is Tampa Bay going to move the ball? And Julio Jones looked decent last week. I think he had 3 catches for like 68 yards. So he showed a little bit of burst. They didn't really need to throw the ball all that much to him. So I think that he's in line for needing to have a decent game this week. Winner take all contest on DraftKings. You should play it as what I call a cash plus lineup. So what that ultimately means is have a cash lineup, but make sure that you include stacking. So you can either have a quarterback and a receiver, or you can have a quarterback, receiver, and then the opposing receiver. But I wouldn't go too crazy on like trying to find a low rostered player. If you like the top quarterback this week, which for me this week is Derek Carr, you can certainly do that. I think other people will try and get more cute than necessary. So for me, it's all about trying to maximize the consistency. If you win one of those in a year, you're probably good. So, yeah, that's the way I would do it. Don't try and get too off the wall. Campbell or Doolin an option? Yeah. So the way that I've been attacking this Indianapolis game is it really depends on the site. So FanDuel at 51 or 5,200, probably not. Just because I think that there's plenty of options, and I don't think that the pricing is all that prohibitive this week. You have Julio Jones at like 5,700, Curtis Samuel at 5,600. Both of those guys I like more. Yahoo is interesting because Yahoo's pricing tends to be a little bit tighter at times. I admittedly am not the biggest Yahoo player, but I could see a scenario where Paris Campbell at $10 is intriguing. I think there's more talent than Ashton Doolin, but that's entirely speculation. There's been a lot of like the last 3 years hype around Paris Campbell and coming out of camp, and then he just doesn't do anything. So I think it's really his time to shine potentially this week. And it really says about the Colts that they didn't go out and get somebody else in the offseason. So PPR, Stevenson, Jeff Wilson, Devontae Smith, or Jacoby Myers. Wilson, Devonta, or Stevenson. Devonta or Stevenson. So flex spot, I would say if you need upside, I would go with Jeff Wilson. If you need just consistency, I think Jacoby Myers is fine. He's a guy that's probably going to catch like 5 for 50 like he does every single week. Is allergic to the end zone. I mean, last year the running joke was he was in the NFL for like 3 years and had never scored a touchdown. I think he ended up getting one, but I want to say it was one of the longest streaks ever. So I would go with Wilson. With Wilson and Debo, you get a lot of the 49ers points. And part of me is expecting that the 49ers are going to respond better than what they did in that really weird game last week. I mean, Soldier Field's drainage looked horrendous. They were basically playing water polo instead of football by the end of the game with how much water was on the field. So my backyard, which I'm about, 10 miles from Chicago or Soldier Field, was not nearly that flooded. Let's see. Best 6K flex on FanDuel. Good question. So I talked a little bit about Julio Jones. I do really like him this week. And I think in a GPP, you could go with a wide receiver. I typically don't do that in cash games. So it depends on what you're playing. I like the consistency of a running back and the enhanced probability that they'll score a touchdown. My top play under 6K this week is Curtis Samuel. Then I go to Julio Jones. And then I go. The problem with Chase Edmonds, we saw 14 carries last week and he did absolutely nothing and is facing a Baltimore run defense, which, historically has been fairly good. So do I trust Chase Edmonds? Not really, but the volume is there. Melvin Gordon, I'm not taking a running back who's second fiddle in Denver. And then Claypool or Ayuk. I would go Julio Jones here out of this list. I'm more comfortable that Julio has the upside that certainly. I mean, Ayuk certainly has upside. I would say that he definitely does. So he would probably be second, but Edmonds or Gordon, unless you're in a cash game setting, I would probably go with the wide receiver there. In a lot of your GPPs, you're using players from Washington, Detroit, Raiders, Arizona. Is it too much? It depends on how many players you're using. So if you're using more than 3 on a team, I think you're making a mistake. I think those are certainly some games that I'm targeting. I do like the Washington side quite a bit. But the Raiders are my favorite team this week. So I don't see. Did some work on this past week, and JJ Watt's banged up. He's highly questionable. I don't know if he's going to play. They lost Chandler Jones in the offseason, and they were really built around a pass rush, which they don't have right now. So if Watt is out, the Cardinals' corners are incredibly weak. They have decent safeties, but their corners, I think it's Marco Wilson, and I forget the other guy's name. I was doing it earlier, but they struggled last week pretty mightily, and Patrick Mahomes basically did whatever he wanted to them. So I think the Raiders are in a fantastic position this week. I could definitely see like a Carr, Adams, Waller, and then you could run it back or with somebody on the Arizona side. Who that is, Zach Ertz is a name. It's difficult. Greg Dortch, if you're on DraftKings, I think is a decent play, given that he's a PPR type guy. So, we'll see. Favorite player prop. Yeah. So for me, I'm targeting unders for Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley this week. I think Saquon, the hype it was like 102 yards rushing and receiving. And McCaffrey was like 105. and they're in the same game. So it could be horrendous. But I think Saquon's hype has gotten, we're in like 2019. It's crazy the hype that he's currently getting after one game against the Titans, which, like, who knows anything at this point. He had 190 yards, and he's just a guy that, like, are we throwing out the last 3 years? Are we throwing out the offensive line issues in New York? Are we throwing out Daniel Jones isn't very good? And, like, everyone's just clamoring that, like, all of a sudden he's back to being one of the best running backs in football, let alone both of those running backs have significant injury risk. Every player does, obviously, but I'm bearish on both of those players, at least for now. McCaffrey, especially because he only had 10 touches this past week. And Coach Rule came out and basically said, like, a lot of his high volume prior to him getting there led to his injuries. I don't have the exact quote in front of me. I can pull it up if you guys really want to see it, but it was, I'll just pull it up. I have it within 2 seconds. Give me 1 second, because it is important that I don't think a lot of people are picking up on this. The quote was, he had a ton of usage the 2 years before I got here. The propensity after that much usage of being injured is really, really high. What that tells me is they are not going back to the 30 touches a game for Christian McCaffrey. They're going to stick with what we saw last week, which is 15 to 20, 18 to 22. And maybe as the season progresses, if they're in the playoff hunt, they're going to give him more. But I don't think a lot of what McCaffrey's price historically was around was he's going to lead. He's going to have 400 touches, which is what he had in 2019, I believe. And he had like 350 in 2018. So with that quote, I'm off of McCaffrey for the time being. Is A-Rob a trap at wide receiver? Yeah, I'm not touching Allen Robinson until he can show something. He had no separation on opening night. So, and with Cooper Kupp there, so many plays are designed to Cooper Kupp that I'm just, Allen Robinson is another guy that, like, people are trying to believe in because of the name, but has he done anything since he left Jacksonville? I mean, that's what now, 5 years? I guess he was okay in 2020 was his last good year. He had 100 catches in Chicago, 98 in 2019, but last year he looked horrendous. We blamed it on Justin Fields. And then, I mean, he had 2 targets. So, yeah, I have no interest in Allen Robinson. If you guys can give this video a like, we do have 65 people, 67 now, which is amazing. So let's keep this thing growing, and we'll continue to do it week in, week out. Damian Harris or Michael Carter? Good question. If I look at non-PPR, I'm going Damian Harris. Don't feel great about it, but I think Carter's value is as a receiver. I think the Jets are in a lot of trouble this week. They have their own offensive line issues. The Browns shut down Christian McCaffrey last week. So I don't think the Jets are going to have a lot of success on the ground. You have Henderson and Akers. Are you being stubborn and sticking with Akers? Yeah, don't do that. Go with Henderson. Henderson was on the field for 82% of the plays. Akers was on for 18. So Akers is only on the field for 12% of the plays. They are going to slow roll him significantly based off of his torn Achilles injury. Not a lot of people have come back from that injury. I don't know another running back that has been successful coming back from that injury. So certainly a lot of the running backs that have done it are much older than Akers. So there's still plenty of time for him to recover. But for now, I think we need to be extremely cautious there. PPR, Jeff Wilson or Allen Robinson? Jeff Wilson. Toughest decision on FanDuel this week? Yeah. So for me, toughest decision was really around quarterback, relatively easy. I'm going with Derek Carr, stacking him with Allen Robinson. It's probably, I'm just pulling up my article that I do for Football Guys. And if I think about like Darrell Henderson, Javonte Williams were pretty easy decisions. The decision that I had was whether or not I spend up at a running back and go with like a Curtis Samuel, Julio Jones. And ultimately, I have Jonathan Taylor in my lineup as of now for cash games. And deciding between him and Joe Mixon and upgrading a Julio or upgrading a Curtis Samuel was somewhat difficult. But with the Pittman injury, I do think I think that Taylor's in line for 30 touches. He had 7 targets last week, which he didn't do much with them. He had 4 receptions for I think 18 yards, but what we saw is an increase in those targets will lead to future production. So thoughts on Pittman's absence effect on Hines or Taylor? I don't think it's going to be that much. I think they're going to need Jonathan Taylor to really win this game. I don't think all of a sudden they're going to be playing Nyheim Hines significantly over Taylor. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. Maybe they'll move Hines out to the slot, and you could see him in some design plays to get him out in space. But I don't think you take a player like Jonathan Taylor off the field, especially giving him 7 targets last week indicates that they're becoming more comfortable with him catching the ball. Russell Gage get in the action, not for me this week. Darrell Henderson, yes. One of my top plays, if not my top play, depending on the site, but excuse me. Any love for Wentz, Terry, Samuel? Yeah, I think that's fine. If you don't want to be on Carr, I think Wentz is certainly a good option. I think Russell Wilson is a really good option. I think Matthew Stafford is a good option. Trey Lance, I think, is due for it's more of a GPP play rather than a single entry. But I think that he is someone that I'm not giving up on. He ran the ball 13 times, something like that last week. So especially on a site where you don't get a 300-yard bonus like FanDuel, if he can rush for a touchdown, I think that's money. Kupp or Adams or both. If you can afford both and you're comfortable with it, it's really hard this week given the lack of the low end options at running back. And there's quite a few options at receiver, whether that's Samuel, whether that's Julio Jones, whether that's even a guy like Hunter Renfrow is interesting to have a bounce back week. Jerry Jeudy is cheap. So there's a number of different guys at that wide receiver position that it does make it a little bit hard to get them both. If you're comparing the two, Adams is the better value this week. He's significantly cheaper on, I think, across the board. So he's the guy that I would be looking at. Yeah, I think with Latavius not getting called up, it's safe to assume Kamara is good to go. Is it supposed to rain hard during that Jacksonville game? Jaguars. It says rain and humid, 10% chance of, or 10% 10 miles per hour wind. But as the way I typically look at it is whether or not the over under has moved. And I'm trying to pull that up right now. If it starts moving like 3 or 4 points downward, like we saw in Chicago, I start to get a little bit nervous. But those sites have tremendous models as far as how much rain and does that impact. And the over-under hasn't moved at all. So I'm not that concerned, but certainly check back in the morning to see. Right now it's 45.5. If it moves to like 42.5, even like 43, I might start to get a little bit nervous, but as of now, I think it's fine. FanDuel, Barkley Samuel or Fournette St. Brown. I would go Barkley Samuel. I think Fournette's in trouble this week, just based off of his history. There's a really good, for those of you, I'm promoting another website, but that's okay. There's a really good website called statmuse.com, and you can go there and just type in like player versus a whole bunch of questions. It's really a cool website, but you can just go and type in Leonard Fournette against the Saints, and it pulls up his entire history against the Saints. You can pull up, I believe you can pull up like when a player is out. So like how Julio Jones is done when Chris Godwin is out, even though there's not history there, but I'm just using a more recent example. But if I look at fantasy points, Leonard Fournette fantasy points against Saints, he has in his 4 games, he has 2, 4, 4, 6 in non PPR. So PPR 3, 10, 7, 13. It's not very good. So I like the upside, and like I mentioned, Samuel's one of my top value plays this week. Fingers crossed. Flex PPR: Bateman, Hunt, Allen Robinson, or Henderson. Henderson, yeah, easy. Any love for Julio over Samuel? Yeah, they're 1 and 2, so I like them both. I have them both in my lineup at the moment. Chase Edmonds, Josh Jacobs. This is Josh Jacobs for me. I think I want all the Raiders I can get. I mean, not in DFS, but in like a season-long league, if you have a Raider, I'm playing them. I think that they put up 35 this week and really have a good week. It's still Derek Carr for me. Better play on FanDuel, Sutton or Kirk. I like Cortland Sutton. I think that this is a get-right game for the Broncos, particularly as I think about they need to figure out who their top receivers are, what their roles are. Sutton and Judy are both intriguing this week. I don't think that they can rely on Javonte Williams catching 11 passes every single week. Like that's just not an offense that's sustainable. Both Sutton and Judy, I think, had 4 catches each last week, something like that. Whereas Kirk, a little bit more difficult matchup going against the Colts. I think he does have upside. They paid him a lot of money. They're going to throw to him quite a bit, but it's Sutton for me. Jamal Williams or Pollard at running back 2. It depends if DeAndre Swift starts. Otherwise, it's probably Pollard. I think the Cowboys go with a run-heavy approach and try to keep the ball out of Cooper Rush's hands because Cooper Rush is a terrible quarterback. Cooks or Judy at flex. Give me Jerry Judy. Edmonds and Tyreek with Lamar and Andrews. I mean, if you want to stack that game, fine. I don't love having a running back wide receiver and the quarterback tight end if unless it's going to be like a game where has big shootout potential. I think both of these defenses are really, really good. So you will be the only person probably who has that if you're going down that route. So could be a good thing, could be a bad thing, but it's certainly different. I just wouldn't go down that route. The Lions like make my head hurt. I know that's weird to say, but the amount of love that the Lions are getting just boggles my mind. I don't know if it's the Hard Knocks effect where like I didn't watch it, but I heard it was an entertaining season. I don't know if it was that they put up 35 points last week, but like John Lee on the power grid was all over Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I don't see it. Like they still have Jared Goff as their quarterback. They still have TJ Hawkinson, who wasn't really that involved last week. They still have DeAndre Swift, who may or may not play. We'll see. But they're still the Lions. And am I ready to pay $6,500 for Amon-Ra St. Brown? For Jared Goff, who threw in a game that they scored 35, Jared Goff threw for 215 yards. Like that just doesn't add up. I'm really scratching my head around, like, are people this crazy? I don't want to say crazy, but are they this excited about Amon-Ra St. Brown? Maybe they are, but I don't know that I can do that. I mean, he had 8 for 64 and a touchdown. Okay. He doesn't score if he doesn't score a touchdown this week, I think it's too expensive. I think a guy like T. Higgins at 5,900 coming off the concussion is, I think Christian Kirk, I think Michael Thomas, Jerry Jeudy at 56. They all have the same sort of range of outcomes as St. Brown. And if one of you guys disagrees with me on the Lions, like, give me a reason. Put it in the chat and let's have a conversation. But I just can't do it yet. Michael Carter or Tyler Higbee? Oof. Carter? Yeah. Carter. Is Rashad Penny a viable play this week? Not really a guy I was looking at. Kenneth Walker comes back this week, so I think he eats into his carries. And Penny only had 12 carries last week. Probably not. Is Akers a worry that he could be more involved? Yeah, yes and no. Henderson is cheap enough that Henderson's still going to get 65 to 70% of the snaps. All the talk is about Henderson. They like him as a running back. There's been some concerns about Akers. Some comments made by Sean McVay that, like, make your head scratch a little bit. And coming off an injury, I think they're gonna slow roll it a little bit. And with Henderson being successful, like, why do we need to push Akers right back in? So if you have Akers in season long, like, sorry, but based off of week 1, I don't know that we can continue to run him out there until further notice. Need one running back in flex. Samuel, Patterson, Jones, Robinson, Sanders. It's Patterson and Samuel for me. I like Cordero Patterson. I think that he's a guy who continues to go overlooked. He had 22 carries this past week. Damian Williams was put on IR. So it's going to be Patterson's show. The Rams running defense historically has not been great. They've been towards the bottom of the barrel the last really a couple of years. So their linebackers in particular have issues. Can I break down the Browns running game? I can try. It's primarily Nick Chubb. Kareem Hunt scored 2 touchdowns last week, which is somewhat unfortunate if you're you had Chubb rostered, but it's mostly going to be Chubb. He had 22 carries last week. He only had 1 reception, but on third downs, if they get behind the sticks, then Kareem Hunt is coming into the game. Kareem Hunt had 11 carries. He did have 4 receptions, but Chubb is the guy that I think I want. He didn't score last week. I think that they correct that this week. He finds the end zone at least once. I said on the Power Grid that I think he's going to find it twice. So I do like Nick Chubb quite a bit this week as a GPP play. He's someone who typically goes underlooked simply because he doesn't catch passes or that many passes. But if he has 130 yards and 2 touchdowns, he doesn't need to. So, and with that comes a cheap price. Jacoby Brissett is awful. I mean, as a Browns fan, I didn't think we could do any worse than Baker Mayfield. And I don't know that he's worse, but he's certainly not better. And they're gonna look to leverage their rushing attack for most of the game against the Jets, keep the ball out of Brissett's hand, and just win the game. So I think Chubb has a big week this week. Okay, keep going through. If you guys can give this a like, we have 85 people here. Enough likes. It does help grow the show. It'd be awesome to get 100 at some point this season. So please, 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 if you can give this a like, it does really help us. In FanDuel Cash, isn't the majority of the field being on Cincy defense going to hurt? I don't know. I think there's three options on FanDuel Cash. I think there's the Patriots at 3,700, the Bengals on 3,900, and the Jaguars at minimum price. The way I have my roster built at the moment is I'm going with the Jacksonville Jaguars at $3,000 because I want Jonathan Taylor in my lineup, and I know that they're facing each other. I get it, but I don't spend up at defense hardly at all. And the more I've thought about that game, I do like Cincy's defense. There's nothing to not like there. But if I think about the upside of that defense, I believe that Cincinnati is going to or Dallas is going to come out and they're going to run the ball heavily. And if you have offensive line issues, throwing the ball, pass protection is much more difficult than run protection. Much easier to find people who can run block than can pass block. So I think they're going to try and run the ball heavily until they fall behind. So I don't know that the sacks upside is as high as we think it is. Certainly Cooper Rush could throw a pick six, could throw multiple interceptions if they fall behind early. But I do think Dallas comes out and does try to keep the ball on the ground and just bleed clock a little bit. Zay Jones, Trevor Lawrence stack. I'd rather have Christian Kirk. I mean, it's fine. It doesn't do much for me, but you'll be able to spend elsewhere, I guess. The Colts haven't beaten Jacksonville in Jacksonville since 2014. Well, streaks are meant to be broken. In going back to that comment, like, they're not the same players. So does it really worry me that 2014 was Andrew Luck and then they're not the same coaching staff? Like, I don't even know if they have any players who are left over from those early Colts teams. So I think it's fine. And GPPs is the week to eat the chalk on Carr Stafford. Yeah, I think there's plenty of other options. Like I mentioned earlier, I think Stafford is fine. Well, you mentioned Stafford. I think Russell Wilson is fine. I think Trey Lance is okay. Carson Wentz, if you really want to go cheap, is fine, not great. And then if you're a believer of Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jared Goff, $5,400. Like, the Washington defense didn't look great last week, so why not? I'm not doing it, but Bengals D over everyone. We sort of just talked about this. Hunter Renfrow. How many do I think this one's hard because Hunter Renfrow had 2 catches, maybe 3 last week, but he only had 22 yards. And that's because Devontae Adams had 17 of the 35 targets or something crazy. So it's hard because how do we think about the Raiders moving forward? They need to get Waller and Renfrow involved. And Renfrow is sort of touchdown dependent. He caught 9 touchdowns last year. So there is a little bit of volatility there. And with Devontae Adams coming back, I mean, Renfrow is not going to catch 100 balls like he did last year. He's not going to score 9 touchdowns. A lot of that action is going to Devontae Adams. But do I think he can get in a PPR setting without a touchdown 11 to 12 points? And if he scores a touchdown, it's another 6. So, 11 to 18 points. Sure. I like Greg Dortch. I'm not clamoring over him. I think that there's a number of good options. I think Zay Jones is fine. Paris Campbell we talked about, but Dortch and Curtis Samuel's probably my top guy that's a value play this week, but Dortch is certainly a good play. Hey, what's going on? 10:22. Got it. I don't know if I can work. I have some personal things going on. wife is expecting our second kid here, and at that point it'll be pretty close. So I don't know if I'll be able to see you, but that should be a good show. Appreciate that, Fantasy Hoops. Hawkinson or Julio Jones? Julio Jones. Hawkinson was tough because 215 yards and they scored 35 points last week. Let's just keep Jared Goff in everyone's mind in Detroit. There's just not that much volume to go around. So if we like him on our St. Brown, I can't, which I don't, he's fine. I don't want to say I don't like him. He's fine. The hype is a little ridiculous. People are loving his dad from what I'm hearing on Hard Knocks, and that's probably feeding into it. But Jared Goff is still their quarterback. So give me the guy who has Tom Brady as their quarterback in a better matchup, given Mike Evans is going to draw a lot of that coverage. That's sort of an easy one for me. Swift or Gibson, it depends if Swift plays. It seems like he's going to. I would probably play DeAndre Swift. Okay, yeah, by all means. If you believe in a player, I'm not here to talk you out of it. I'm not always right. I'm just sharing an opinion. But if you're confident in him, go for it. If you take Fournette out of your DraftKings lineup, who do you replace him with? Let's see. Fournette is 6,700. Javonte Williams, if you don't have him in there at 6,500, is a must play on DraftKings. I feel caught 11 passes last week, so even if he catches 7 this week on DraftKings full PPR, that's a no brainer. Weather concern enough to come off Trey Lance. Are there weather concerns there? No, it's 69 and cloudy, 13 miles an hour wind, so no. But weather wouldn't be the reason I'd have concerns about Trey Lance. Trey Lance is priced. Let's see where he's priced. 5,700. So it is a really good price. I would try and find a way in cash to go up to Derek Carr, maybe even. No, I mean it's close between him and Carson Wentz. But if you believe in the running ability of Lance and that it was a fluke based off of the weather, I'm fine with it. I would rather have Derek Carr, but Trey Lance is certainly an option. No. I mean, is he minimum priced? I know he had a decent game last week, but he's not gonna have 81 yards and a touchdown. He's the 5th option in that offense, and that's Taysom Hill for those of you that didn't see the screen. But he's you have Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, Jarvis Landry, Alvin Kamara, maybe Mark Ingram, and then Taysom Hill. So they're really trying to find a seam route where the defense largely forgets about him. You want to take a shot in a GPP? Sure. We're still trying to figure that out. We kind of like how it's flowing with 3, but it allows us more time to do other things instead of just go boom, 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 like we have done the last couple of years, just as far as player, and do things like the overreaction segment we had this week and the tracking each other's must, I don't even know what to call it, but what sports bet we like of the week. And we want to try some different things on that show. So I don't know that we're going to go back to 4, but we'll see. Mariota London, sneaky. It'll be sneaky. London looked pretty good. I think a lot of people will go Mariota Pitts and hope for a bounce back there, as Kyle Pitts is pretty cheap. So, but I think it's a decent option. Does Ohio State beat Michigan this year? Probably. I hope so. Dotson at 5,500 seems like a free square. He would be on a lot of weeks, and we just hit 100 viewers, which I was hoping to hit by like week 5. So thank you. And we fell back up below, but thank you, everyone. The growth of this show is been great. Continue to hit the like button and continue to help us grow. We will extend this. We'll do different things during the, different times. We may add a Sunday morning show if there's interest. So, he would be a free square on a normal week. There are so many cheap options this week that you could take at wide receiver, whether that's like I've talked about Curtis Samuel, Julio Jones. If you're playing on DraftKings, Greg Dortch, Zay Jones, Dotson seems great, but I also don't want to overreact because of the 2 touchdowns either. So there's a number of options in that offense. Dotson is certainly intriguing, but I don't want to overreact just yet. You also have Dobbins. I don't know. I don't remember, Anthony, what the question was, but Dobbins has me a little bit nervous just because I do think they'll ease him back in. But 10, 12, 13 carries, I would expect. Thoughts on paying down for Wilson and Henderson, pumping up at wide receivers. I don't love Jeff Wilson. I love Henderson. Obviously, I've talked about him probably 30 times in this show. But Wilson, do we ever trust a running back in a Shanahan offense? I don't. Like, Trey Lance certainly is going to take a lot of that carries. Deebo Samuel's going to take some of that work. So I typically stay away from the 49ers, but if you want to go for it, go for it. Like, in a GPP setting, a lot of this is luck-based. A lot of it's probabilities, but, Wilson scores 2 touchdowns, and I look like a fool. So if you're confident in it, go for it. Burrow or Stafford at quarterback, and tight end Logan Thomas, or pick up Taysom Hill. Yeah, I would go Stafford and Logan. Well, hold on. Let me look at my numbers. Certainly it's Logan Thomas for me. I think the risk of a 0, at least another week for Taysom Hill before I overreact. But Burrow versus Stafford, it's actually Burrow. I have him slightly ahead of Matthew Stafford this week. My mind is so focused on DFS, and from a pricing standpoint, Burrow is higher than Stafford. So I really haven't been thinking much about Burrow because I expect that game to be a low scoring, but a lot of that work is going to be through the air. What's my thoughts against Najee Harris against New England? I don't have a lot of thoughts on it, to be honest. It's tricky because they completely shut down Trey Edmonds. The over-under is like 39 or 40, and New England's defense looked pretty good, and their offense looked completely inept. So, and is Harris 100% healthy? So, if I look at the Steelers' snap counts last week, 2022, he's only on the field for 58% of the time, which last year was like 80 plus. So I'm not entirely convinced he's healthy. If he's your best option, fine. But in DFS, I'm not targeting him. I think he's too expensive. Bengals D is fine. They're certainly a top end play this week. Jonathan Taylor or Cooper Kupp. If it's PPR, you go Cooper Kupp. If it's not half point or less, I go Jonathan Taylor. Debo, Chase, or Tyreek? Chase. Yeah, Chase. I think Chase is in a different tier than Tyreek and Deebo Samuel. My wide receiver tier 1 and tier 2. I said it on the Power Grid this week, but if you guys aren't listening to the Power Grid, I highly, highly encourage everyone to go and listen to it. We've put out some really good information this week as far as who we really like. But Jamar Chase, or tier 1 is Cooper Kupp by himself. Tier 2 is Devontae Adams, Justin Jefferson, and Jamar Chase. And then tier 3, you get into the guys like CeeDee Lamb and those types of guys. But yeah, for me, it's Tyreek Hill would probably be in that tier 3 as well. But If Gabriel Davis doesn't play, then Thielen or Michael Thomas. Give me Michael Thomas. Dotson or Bateman? Dotson? Yeah. I trust him just a little bit more. I'm still not sold on this like drop back passer Lamar Jackson. I think he's trying to earn a contract. Good for him if he's able to do it, but thoughts on Scotty Miller as a sneaky play? No, thank you. It could. Let me see what I have him right now. Curtis Samuel. I still have him around 10%. Like on DraftKings, Greg Dortch is right there with him at 9%. If I look at guys who are probably over rostered, Devontae Adams is a guy who's going to be ridiculously rostered. I have him around 27, 28%. Saquon's another one that I think is too high. He's around 25%, which like I talked about at the beginning of the show. I get like why people are excited about Saquon. I understand it. He looked absolutely amazing last week. But is he a guy that like you should be paying, especially on FanDuel where he's $8,800, 25% of rosters? It seems crazy for a guy that has had really one, maybe two games in three years. I'm not going that route. All right, so we have 10 minutes left. Like we typically do, I will answer any question that you guys have before the YouTube timer hits 10 o'clock. So at 10 o'clock, we'll cut off the questions. We'll go as long as the questions that we have. So put in and that's 10 o'clock Central, 11 Eastern. So put in your questions now. We'll get to everything, and we'll go as late as we need to. But I am going to try and catch some of the Canelo versus Triple G fight here shortly. Tyreek or St. Brown? Tyreek. I think St. Brown will be too popular. Allen Robinson or Jalen Waddle? I mean, this one, we talked about Allen Robinson quite a bit. It's Jalen Waddle for me. Pretty easy. Allen Robinson, like I might take Greg Dortch over Allen Robinson, to be honest. The separation was just zero, and two targets are really concerning. Zeke Elliott or Darrell Henderson? Give me Henderson. I think he's in a better offense. He was on the field for 82% of the plays. Elliott's less than that, and like Elliott looked better than Pollard. Certainly, Pollard looked like Pollard everyone loves, but Pollard didn't look great last week. So Elliott was still going to have a role in that offense, but Hines a top pass catcher? I don't think so. I think he has a role, maybe 3, 4, 5 catches, but I don't think he all of a sudden like goes off. Like when was the last time Nyheim Hines had a massive game? If I just look at his game logs, he had 6 catches last week, which is the most that he's had since November 29th of 2020. He's typically a guy who's 4 to 6 catches per game. And what you're hoping for is the couple games throughout his career where he's found the end zone twice. He only had 1 touchdown last year, so I think it's a bit of an overreaction with Pittman being out. Is Alberto a must play on DraftKings? It's a good question. I don't think he's a must play. I think he's a good play. But if I look at other good plays, Logan Thomas is fine. Kyle Pitts, if you can go to 5,400, I think is okay. Darren Waller's okay. There was some talk on the Power Grid that the other guys like Jawan Johnson. I pass. But like Tyler Higbee at 4,200 isn't awful. Tight end's pretty rough this week. So if you really like Alberto, go for it. But any of those guys you're hoping for a touchdown, to be honest. Is Gainwell startable play? It depends what your other options are, Anthony. In DFS, I don't think so, but if you're in a season log league, could be. It just depends what your other options are. Anything positive to say about the Patriots backfield? They are drawing a paycheck that is larger than mine. That's what I have to say about positivity for them. Yeah, I have some jerseys that I want to hang up behind me. We'll get to that. I have an 18-month-old daughter and another one on the way, so give me a break here. Cooks, Ertz, or Judy Schultz? That's Brandon Cooks is not a guy I've even thought about this week, to be honest. Let me see where I have him projected. I do like Judy over him, but Dalton Schultz versus Ertz. I think I like Ertz better than Schultz. Give me Judy Schultz, I guess. I just don't love Brandon Cooks. Yeah, we may do a Sunday morning show. We may do one. I need to figure out my schedule, but we may do one. Gio Bernard, no, thank you. Oh boy. Yeah, yes. Yeah. Javonte for me is the first name I'm clicking on this week on DraftKings. I think if he catches 11 passes again, you're going to have him. If he catches 7, you're going to feel really good about it. And Gibson is fine. He's fine. Amon-Ra, I've talked a little bit about it, but he's another guy that, does he have the upside of 130 yards and 2 touchdowns like some of these other guys do? Even a 2 touchdown upside, maybe. But with Jared Goff as your quarterback, I don't see it. Higgins, we know, has a 100-yard upside. He's done it. He did it 5 or 6 times last year. So, I don't even know what that means, Ron. I don't know what that means. How much is Lamb's value decreased by Prescott's injury and a bad offensive line? A lot. If we were drafting right now, he would not be a first-round pick. He's probably not a second-round pick. Maybe back end of the second. Because Prescott's going to be back, right? He's going to be back in 4 to 6 weeks, something like that. So I wouldn't give up on him if you're in a season-long league. I wouldn't trade him because what are you going to get for him at this point? People are looking to trade for CD Lamb or looking for, a low end, like an Antonio Gibson type guy. Like, if you're confident in your team surviving for a couple weeks, and especially if 50% of your league makes the playoffs, you'll get CD Lamb back. They'll figure out their offensive line at some point, and I think he'll be fine. But yeah, right now it's rough. Appreciate that, Matt. We spend a lot of time on the power grid, so I do appreciate that. Any ideas about a run back for my Ram stack? Kyle Pitts, I think, is interesting. He had 1,000 yards as a tight end last year, and he's still only 21 years old. So I'm not ready to write him off. I think he struggles getting consistently open as the number one threat. But Drake London had a good game last week. Our defense is going to give more coverage to Drake London, probably. But I do like Pitts as a GPP play in a stack quite a bit. Someone mentioned Drake London earlier. I don't hate it. Patterson, he's fine, but I don't know that he's best in a shootout because if they fall behind, are all of those touches going to go to him? He doesn't. What's interesting about Cordero Patterson is like he's a converted wide receiver, but he's not. He doesn't catch the ball nearly as much as one might think. He only had 52 catches last year. He had 3 in week 1. So he's not a guy who's going to catch 7, 8 passes typically, which is somewhat surprising. There's a worse situation. I still don't get it, Ron. That's interesting, Cody. I haven't even thought about Dallas's defense, to be honest. I don't hate it, considering Burrow was sacked and had the turnover issues and has been sacked quite a bit in his couple seasons that he's been a quarterback. So it's an off-the-wall type play that could Micah Parsons do something. We know Trayvon Diggs is a gambling quarterback or corner. It's interesting. Brady or Lance? Brady. Oof. Yeah, Brady. Favorite stack of the week: Derek Carr and Devontae Adams. Thoughts on Cordero Patterson for GPPs? I think he's fine. I think he's good. I just talked a little bit about him. I wouldn't necessarily want him in like a huge stack, but if he has 22 carries again, he's going to be overlooked. He doesn't get the love he otherwise should. Cup or Adams in a GPP. Give me Devontae Adams. Gibson or Javonte. Javonte or Nick Chubb in a GPP. Depends on the site. DraftKings, I have to go Javonte. FanDuel, I'll go Nick Chubb. Naheem Hines or Rex Burkhead, 1 point PPR. Give me Rex Burkhead just because he was on the field for 70% or higher last week. Dameon Pierce was largely a non-factor. I know that they said that they're going to try and give him the ball more, but remains to be seen. Best cheap tight end FanDuel single entry GPP, Zach Ertz. Albert Akuegbunam is interesting as well. Cooks will be low rostered. No, you want the chat to answer it. That's fine. But I would go Brady. Deontay probably. Checking. It's close. Yeah, Deontay and Michael Thomas. Hold on. Might be Dylan. Yeah, Dylan. Sorry. So Brady, Dylan, Deontay. Favorite stack with Wentz? I like Curtis Samuel a lot, but I mean Terry McLaurin is certainly interesting. Isn't Kamara's price on FanDuel way too cheap? It's cheap, but he's another guy that, like, if his name was Robert Jones and he hasn't been productive in a couple seasons, is he that intriguing? It's a very difficult matchup going up against Tampa Bay. So I don't know that he's 100%. I don't know that he's going to get all those carries. So it's probably a pass for me. Dortch, Jones, or Samuel. Pick 2. I don't know which Jones you're referring to. Try and figure it out really quickly. Julio, I'm imagining. Got him. It's clearly late. Julio Jones and Curtis Samuel. All right. I am going to answer like 1 or 2 more here. Patterson or Gibson. I feel like we talked a lot about that on DraftKings. I would go Patterson or Gibson. Patterson slightly. So, okay. So that's all for this week. It's 10:04. I know I said I'd cut it off at 10, but if you guys could give this one more time, if you could give this a like, if you could subscribe to the YouTube channel, if you could go and give the Power Grid a like, if you haven't done already, that really helps that show as well. And we'll consider doing a Sunday morning, not tomorrow, but on a future Sunday, we'll definitely consider it. So thanks everyone. Thanks for hanging out. Amazing at the turnout that this thing has grown into. So really happy with that. And with that, I will let everyone go. We will see everyone week 3 and best of luck. Thanks everybody.